curiosity as a choice, not as a trait that some people have or other people lack, not as a state of mind that we're stuck in, but really as a decision that's always available to us.
So I start with this notion of I must choose to be curious. What is it that person is telling me that is going to help me learn something I don't know?
Equipped with a set of tools and ideas and concepts and frameworks that for me and many others were just completely game-changing. I did not create the conditions for them to feel safe to actually ask for help, to actually let me know what was not working. They said, if I want to truly make someone feel safe to share the truth with me, I'm never going to invite them to my office and make them sit across the CEO desk, which is big and intimidating, and assume that they're going to feel safe. And I think to me, it's just
there is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing at all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of your comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. If you follow my work or have ever worked with me or even pay attention to this podcast on a regular basis, then you know that I am a massive fan of having great questions. In fact, I think great questions should be in every leader's arsenal. In fact, I think it's some of the secret sauce. I often talk about having questions in your back pocket that you can pull out for the particular occasion because it's amazing what a great set of questions can do for you. And particularly when you step outside of your comfort zone, without a doubt, you have to ask more. So asking questions is going to lead to greater ability to persuade, to solve problems, to deliver results. The question is, how do you ask? How do you ask and not feel like you should know and don't know and look rather foolish? How do you make sure people are telling you the truth, even when you're asking? How do you get them to tell you what's gone wrong so you know what to do about it? And how do you tap into that wisdom of people around you? That is what we're talking about today. So my guest is Dr. Jeff Wetzler. He's a globally recognized expert on learning and leadership with a hands-on, surprisingly effective ways to find out what other people really think, know, and feel, leading to, as I said, smarter decisions, more creative solutions, and deeper relationships. I should tell you that Jeff has also an entrepreneur. He co-founded Transcend, which is a leading organization for driving innovation in education. Prior to that, he was Chief Learning Officer for Teach America. And prior to that, he was at a consulting company called Monitor Group at the time, now called Monitor Deloitte. And if that's not enough, he's a fellow at the Aspen Global Leadership Network. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Wanda. It is wonderful to be with you. I appreciate that very kind introduction.
I'm happy to do it. It's well-deserved, and I'm super excited about this book we're talking about, by the way, Ask. Tap into the hidden wisdom of people around you for unexpected breakthroughs in leadership and life. Okay, Jeff, what got you started, of all the things you've done in education and consulting and innovation, what got you started on this journey about asking?
Well, the journey started probably in childhood, but officially in my first job out of college, which, as you mentioned, was at Monitor Group, where I had the opportunity to learn from some of the field's pioneers of organizational learning, including people like Chris Argyris and David Cantor and Diana Smith, and really was equipped with a set of tools and ideas and concepts and frameworks that for me and many others were just completely game-changing, that truly allowed us to break down barriers in relationships, to ask better questions, to learn from one another. And I was at Monitor for almost a decade. And then my first job out of Monitor, after Monitor, was actually with one of my clients. I stepped into my first operating role. And despite the fact that I had been well equipped with all of this, foundational stuff and had even taught it to consultants around the world and clients around the world at Monitor, I got tripped up. And I was leading, what we were doing is essentially massive training institutes all over the country for new teachers who were getting ready to teach in some of the toughest contexts in the country. And we had these big institutes, like 500 people or so. Every institute would have its own full-time team of people planning it all year long, the curriculum, the practicums, the food, the logistics, the staff, like everything. And just before one of them was about to launch, I discovered that it was basically about to implode, unbeknownst to me. That all the things that the team was supposed to have been putting in place all year long were falling apart. Despite the fact that all year long I had been checking in and said, how's it going? And been told, it's on track, a couple bumps, but we got it or whatever. And thankfully a team member stepped in and truly saved the day at the very last minute. So it came off smoothly, but it almost didn't. And that would have had massive implications for hundreds of teachers and tens and thousands of kids who really deserve great teachers. And so I asked myself the question, how come? How come I didn't find out what the team was really struggling with? Because they were actually struggling with a whole set of things and not telling me. And in the end, that was my fault as a leader. I did not create the conditions for them to feel safe to actually ask for help, to actually let me know what was not working. And if they had done that, I would have rolled up my sleeves. I would have helped to clear the barriers. I would have helped to problem solve. But they were thinking if they told me that, they would be in trouble. Maybe they'd get fired. Maybe I'd be upset with them. And so it helped me to see that despite being curious, despite having good questions to ask, despite knowing how to listen, if you don't create the level of safety for people to actually tell you the real truth, especially a hard truth, it's not enough. And in that situation, I was working across lines of difference of everything from age to power to identity to background to race to gender, all of it. And I discovered just how complex it is for people to truly find out what others around them think and feel and know. And not just limited to leaders and their direct reports. Leaders don't find this out from their own bosses, from their boards, from their clients, from their investors. And so it highlighted to me in a painful and visceral way at a moment that I was out of my own comfort zone how tough this can be.
Yeah. I don't think I talk to a CEO who doesn't belabor the fact that it's really difficult to know what is really going on, because each CEO will say, I am keenly aware that every person coming to meet with me is coming with an agenda. So how do I know then? And if it's there, then you know it's rocking down the organization as well. All right. So Jeff, true confession time here. I can't resist asking, what were you doing that created such an unsafe environment? Like, what was it that you look back and say, I should have done?
I was ignoring what one of my colleagues called the power of my position. Just the fact that I was perceiving myself as, it's just me. I'm a kind of a dumb schmuck making it up myself, making things up as I go along. Why would anyone be intimidated by me? Why would and yet the fact is I occupied a certain role. And by ignoring the ways in which my own role, and the way that I took up that role left other people feeling worried or unsafe, I failed to do the things that ultimately, and what I learned and what I write in the book, to create the deeper level of connection, to connect to them on their terms, to open up about my own uncertainties and vulnerabilities, to demonstrate to them that I can handle hard truths without anyone getting in trouble. All those were the things that I failed to do.
This is, everybody's going to use the word psychological safety at this point, because they're going to say, indeed, that's what we know, Amy Edmondson's research and others since then, that teams that have psychological safety are likely to get better outcomes. That's the famous Google report driven by Amy. But I get frustrated with that statement. And I get frustrated with it because it's a descriptor. It isn't a set of actions. So walk us through what you see as the set of actions that deal with the power difference, the intimidation factor. So your intention is not to make people feel bad, but still it's happening. So walk us through, how do we create that kind of safety environment? Yes.
And Amy was an important collaborator in this book's project. She was kind enough to write the foreword of the book. And I think one of the things that she has noted about the book is it's trying to take the important principles of psychological safety and make them actionable at an interpersonal level and at a team level as well. And so the book talks about an approach called the Ask approach, which is essentially 5 practices or 5 steps that, when put together, give us the greatest chance of truly understanding what other people think, feel, and know what's really going on for them. Step 2 is called Make It Safe. So we can go right into that if you want, or we can zoom back out and go through a 5. What do you prefer?
Let's go through the 5, and then I'm going to linger on number 2 for a little bit. Okay,
perfect. So this first practice, or the first step of the Ask approach, is called Choose Curiosity. And this is a recognition that nothing else matters if I'm not genuinely curious to know where you're coming from, what's going on for you, what's real for you, what I can learn from you. And I look conversely, if I am curious, and you can tell that I truly actually want to know, I radiate an energy that leads you to want to be sharing more with me. That the desire to know cultivates other people's willingness to share openly. And I look at curiosity as a choice, not as a trait that some people have or other people lack, not as a state of mind that we're stuck in, but really as a decision that's always available to us. And when we make that decision, we are centering ourselves on this question, what can I learn from you? What can I learn from this person? With the presumption being that there is something important that we can learn from every single person. So that's number one, choosing curiosity. Number two is then it's called make it safe. And when I was talking with Amy Edmondson about this one, she said technically we should probably call it make it safer, because it may not ever be fully safe for someone. But these are the strategies that you can use to lower the barriers for people. And there's really three. One is called creating connection. And creating connection is not just about getting to know people and building trust, although that's really important. And by the way, it's really important to do that well before you need it, not at the moment you need it. So digging your well before you're thirsty. But it's even about the time and space and place of how do you create that connection. And it's funny that you mentioned CEOs. So for the book, I interviewed iconic CEOs, CEOs of organizations like Kraft or Medtronic, because I also knew that CEOs are notorious for not getting the full truth from people. People tell CEOs what they think they want to hear, what's going to get their agenda served or whatever. So I said to these CEOs, people like Bill George or Irene Rosenfeld, how did you get the truth out of people? Especially people a little more junior than you, several layers away. And one of the common themes is they said, if I want to truly make someone feel safe to share the truth with me, I'm never going to invite them to my office and make them sit across the CEO desk, which is big and intimidating, and assume that they're going to feel safe. I'm going to go where they're going to feel most comfortable. Maybe that means we're going to do a ride along together. Maybe that means we're going to have lunch. Maybe we're going to take a walk, whatever it is. And there was no single answer other than I need to go wherever they feel safest and most comfortable. And that's all part of how do you create connection. Second strategy is opening up, which is essentially a recognition that if I want the other person to open up, they will feel much safer if I open up first, even if I'm just opening up about why I'm asking the question, so that they don't have to guess what my agenda is. And the more vulnerably I can open up, the safer they are to open up vulnerably too. So create connection, opening up. And then the third piece I call radiating resilience. And this is essentially demonstrating to the other person that I can handle your truth. If you have something hard to say to me and you say it, I'm not going to blame you. I'm not going to hold you responsible for my emotions. I'm not going to shoot the messenger. I am resilient enough to take in your truth. And that could happen in many ways. I had one colleague who used to say to me, Jeff, I want your most critical feedback on what I'm giving you. And when he said that was demonstrating a level of resilience to me, because he wasn't saying, give me 3 things you like and 1 thing you don't like. He wants the most critical feedback. I had someone else say to me after I gave them some tough feedback, they said, I trust you so much more now, because I know that if you've got something hard to say to me, I can count on you that you're going to say it. That demonstrated resilience to me as well. So those 3 strategies, creating connection, opening up, radiating resilience, are all part of making it safe.
Okay. That makes sense to me. So, and certainly have seen those go wrong in more times than I can count, as I'm sure you have as well, including the person who says, so tell me what it is that I am missing. And I tell them what it is they're missing. And you can see the face goes, I don't want to hear that. I don't believe that. I'm not listening to it. Okay. All right. Fine.
They are not radiating resilience in that moment.
Absolutely not. Okay. All right. So we have choose curiosity. We have make it safe. What's the third practice?
The third one is the heart of the ask approach, which is called pose quality questions. And you talked earlier about how much you see the value in questions as well. And my definition of a quality question is very simple. A question that helps us learn something important from someone else. That's what I call a quality question. And many things that we think have passed as questions or that have question marks are not quality questions by that definition. We have clumsy questions where people might layer 3 or 4 questions on, or be rhetorical, or sneaky questions where people are trying to maneuver you to a certain outcome, or attack questions. So lots and lots of questions are not quality questions. Quality questions, I kind of think of in the same way that I would imagine a surgeon might think of their scalpel and all the other different tools and instruments that they have. There's different question strategies that we can use depending on what we're trying to find out or learn. And there's a taxonomy. And in the book, I literally list out, here are about a dozen different quality question strategies that you can use. And it's not 100 or 1,000. I mean, it's a limited learnable amount. And I think to me, it's just fascinating that we don't get taught what these quality question strategies are in school or in work or whatever else. But if you can learn about a dozen strategies, you have a vastly greater repertoire of options for how to learn from other people. So maybe just to give you one example of a quality question strategy, one of them I call simply request reactions. And so this is after you would share a point of view with someone or offer some feedback or make a request, to pause and simply say, so what are your reactions to that? How does that sit with you? How does that strike you? What does that make you think? What might I be overlooking? Any of those are strategies that significantly increase the chances that I'm going to learn about your thinking, about my thinking. So that if I have a gap in my thinking, or if you see a flaw in my thinking, or you disagree with my thinking, I'm going to find it out. And I think a lot of us assume, well, I'm going to find it out anyways, because you're going to tell me if you disagree. But for all the reasons we talked about earlier, that people don't necessarily feel safe doing that, chances are you may not actually know what someone's true reactions are unless you ask them a question like that. So that's just one of the strategies of post-quality questions.
All right. What's interesting to me that there's only a dozen. I find that fascinating. We're coming back to that one. All right. So I've got choose curiosity, make it safe, pose quality questions. Number 4?
It's called listen to learn. And so this is a recognition that even if I pose the highest quality of questions to you, it all depends on, do I actually listen to and hear your responses? And listening to learn is a particular intention of listening. It's different than listening to prove a point, or listening to be right, or listening to get out of there as quickly as possible, or listening to look like you're listening. It's really listening to truly understand the essence of what someone else thinks and feels and knows. And it's not just listening for the content of what they have to say, but also listening for the emotion, the feelings that are both expressed and displayed, as well as the actions that people are taking in a conversation. Are they expressing agreement? Are they pushing back? Are they requesting help? Are they enlisting support? Whatever it is. And so content, emotion, and actions are the 3 lenses that I talk about in terms of listening through. Most of us tend to gravitate towards one naturally and can sometimes miss important information that comes through the other ones. But if we can train ourselves to listen through all 3 lenses, just the same way that I think a music aficionado can listen to the vocals and the percussion and the harmony and each instrument, you get a much richer picture of what actually is being communicated by someone.
Right. Yes, and we could debate about which one of those is more important, but it is true. It is very difficult in a speed rushed, hurry up, get to conclusion, take an action fast world to listen to learn. I'm listening to confirm. I'm listening to find out that you are wrong, and I know now exactly what to say to you. I'm doing everything other than just for the purposes of learning how you really feel and think.
Exactly.
That's at the heart of what it's all about. Okay. All right. Number 5 then.
Number 5 is called reflect and reconnect. This is my favorite step of the Ask approach because I'm a junkie for learning. And I believe reflection is how we squeeze the learning out of our experiences. It's how we actually convert experiences into insights, and insights into action. And I think reflection gets a bad rap because a lot of people think, well, I don't have time to reflect. I don't know how to reflect. Do I have to go on some meditation retreat to reflect on my life? But reflection can be very, very simple and very practical. And so in this step, I'm essentially saying there's a very structured process we can go through to reflect that doesn't take long, and I call it sift it and turn it. So sift it is just simply to say, if someone's told you 30 things, sift it through. What are the 3 or 4 most important things? Because not everything that they tell you is necessary to take in. Not everything that they tell you is sometimes healthy to take in. So sift through what are the gems they told you. Sometimes that sifting is helpful to do with a coach or a mentor or a friend or a colleague so you don't accidentally sift out the wrong stuff. But once you have those gems, then turn it. And that just means turn it over in your mind 3 times. The first time to ask yourself, how does what I heard influence the story I have about someone. Maybe it confirms something. Maybe it sheds light on something I was overlooking. Maybe I realize I was right about this part, but wrong about this part. I nuance my story, whatever it may be. The second turn is, what steps can I take based on that? Maybe I want to double down on my plan. Maybe I want to apologize. Maybe I want to make a right turn. Maybe I want to put a new chip on this part of the game board. Whatever it is, what steps do I take? And the third turn is stuff level reflection, which is to say, what did I hear that might shed some light on my own stuff? Does it help me see a bias I might have, a wrong assumption I was making that I often hold, a certain way I'm being in my life? And so this is sometimes the hardest and the most emotional turn to make, but is usually the most powerful because it's applicable to so many situations. So that sift it and then turn it for your story, your steps, and your stuff is the reflection process. And then I call it reflect and reconnect, because that reconnect part I think is just as important, which is going back to the other person and saying, here's how I reflected on what you had to say. Here's what I'm learning. Here's what I'm going to do about it. And thank you for taking the time. Thank you for taking the risk, if it was a risk. And by the way, is there something different you were hoping I would learn from this? Is there some other step you were thinking that you would have wanted me to take? Doesn't mean I have to take it, but it's good to know that. And that closing of the loop, I think, is very rare. And it shows people they haven't wasted their time, shows them how powerful they are. I think it deepens the relationship, and it I think vastly increases the chances they're going to want to continue to share over time.
I think you're right about that. It's one of the ingredients, I think, in terms of feedback that we often don't do as feedback receivers. And I swear it's the secret for making people give you better feedback. Because I took a risk to tell you what I really think about how you're doing. And I want to know, how did that land? What did you do with it? What do you think? Do I do it again? Do I not do it again? And when you come back and say, look, I've reflected. Here's what's important to me. Here's what I'm going to do about it. Here's, what this means to me, or whatever your stuff, steps, and story.
Yeah.
And I say back, this is what I'm going to do in my language, not in their language.
Yes, exactly.
It's not a parrot, but boy, is it a powerful way to ensure that you're going to continue to get feedback, at least from that person.
And by the way, if you don't do that, or you do the opposite of that, you're never going to get that feedback from that person. And by the way, probably not from someone else either, because you're going to start to get the reputation. It was a waste of time to talk to this person. Don't bother doing it.
Don't bother. It's a waste. Yeah, absolutely. And that's true not just up. It's true equally important to peers, because sometimes you need your peers to tell you more than anything what it is that they're struggling with you, because that is what is going to really drive success.
And it's been so interesting to me to see how often peer-to-peer feedback does not happen. When people people are operating, but they don't want to bother their peers or overstep into their lane or seem like they're being too bossy or whatever. And so that lateral feedback is so often just not happening.
Right. I agree. And it is a powerful component. I see that all the time when you can structure it and make it happen. All right. So the heart of the ask approach is to make sure that people are telling me what I really need to know as a leader, to be sure that things are not going awry. And when I'm out of my comfort zone, so I don't know every detail there is to know about how a plan is working or not working, or obstacles or collaborations or conflict or whatever it is, I don't know as much as my team knows. I've got to be able to ask in a way that gives me really solid answers. So I start with this notion of I must choose to be curious. What is it that person is telling me that is going to help me learn something I don't know? So what am I learning from that person, as opposed to how fast can I rush through this? Number 2 is make it safe for them to actually tell. We're coming back to that, but you say that there are 3 strategies that create the connection. So there is something there. I'm going to get them to open up, which often
I'm going
means
to open up myself
I'm going to open up myself. That's right. And then I'm going to radiate resilience. Okay.
Yes.
There's more to say about that one. And then I want to pose quality questions that allow me to learn something. Okay. And there are 12 of those, you say. And then 4, I want to listen with the intention of learning. And then 5, I want to reflect and then reconnect. So easy to say, Jeff, and so extraordinarily difficult to do.
Each one of these practices is a muscle to build. And it is not an overnight thing, but it's also not it's going to take me 30 years to do this kind of thing as well.
Right. I mean, it's just say on that, reflect and reconnect. I'm just going to add a component to it, because you're right. We don't often do that. It's just not standard practice. And There's a long-standing piece of data in the leadership literature that most executives learn from on the job rather than in a classroom. Okay, I take issue with how that data was actually developed in the first place. I think if we went back and did a different analysis, we'd find a different story. But either way,
I want to hear more about that at some point.
Yeah, what I contend, though, is that what classroom and coaching experiences do for you is allow you to reflect and to sift through all the things that have happened in the course of your career that you've tried and tested, and pause to say, what really caused that success, or what really caused that misstep along the way? So I think those moments are not that they don't teach you how, they create the space.
I love
for
that.
Reflect and
particularly if they're structured in the reflective way that you're just talking about.
I think it's the most important piece.
I would add one thing. I'd be curious what you think about that, which is, and I haven't seen the exact data that you're talking about, although I'd be really interested to see it. I think that there are far more opportunities to learn on the job every day than most of us actually take advantage of. And so in many ways, I look at the Ask approach as an opportunity to rapidly accelerate the learning, in some ways to turn many of our day-to-day relationships into potential coaching and reflective moments as well, where we can be tapping into so much more of that, such that I do hope it's true that at some point, the fraction of time that we're in a classroom or with a coach is tiny compared to the amount of learning that we're doing every single interaction that we're having.
Yeah, I think that, and we certainly can't do coaching every single day or every single month or, the rest of our lives. That certainly is not plausible, but it helps in moments, particularly moments of transition, I find. You'll also be interested to know that I was just talking with a CEO that I've been working with who's trying to take his top team to the next level. And his statements are the following. I just want everybody sitting around that table to wonder, who is this person sitting beside me? So curiosity. To say what it is that I have to learn from them, and why is it that they're pushing so hard on this particular issue.
Yes.
What a magical component. It's right there in the middle of your Ask model as well.
I love it. I absolutely. That's the epitome of curiosity, right there. I love it. I want to meet this CEO. That's amazing.
Pretty impressive. I will leave it at that one. All right. So we've done the methodology. Let me talk about why it's so difficult for people to tell you the truth. So you've said, I have to make it safe. And we've talked about 3 strategies for making it safe. What else gets in the way of people telling the truth? Yeah.
So the biggest thing that gets in the way, not surprisingly, is fear. Fear of what would be the impact if I say the truth? How is it going to impact the receiver? Maybe it's going to upset them. Maybe it's going to burden them. Maybe it's going to hurt them. How's it going to impact me? Maybe it's going to get me in trouble. Maybe I'm going to look stupid. Maybe it's going to impact our relationship. It's going to put tension. So fear of the impact is the number one barrier. But in the research for the book, there were 3 other barriers that also surfaced. A second one is people may actually want to say something, but they may not have the words to say it. It may occur to them as an intuition, a gut feeling in their body, and not actually come out in words. Or if they do have words, they know, well, these words are not going to help. These words are going to make things worse, and so I'm not going to say anything. And sometimes what's interesting about not having the words is it's a math problem. And what I mean by that is I discovered that the human brain can think at around 900 words a minute, but the human mouth can only get out about 125 words a minute. So if you think about that, anytime you're talking to someone, they're only saying about 125 of the 900 words they're thinking in that minute. You're hearing less than 15% of what they're really thinking, not because they are intentionally withholding from you. It's just how the mind works and how the math works and the brain works. So all of that is around the category of, do they have the words to say it? A third barrier is people are tired and exhausted and busy, and they may be thinking to themselves, if I say it, then I'm going to have a conversation about it. Then I'm going to get follow-up questions. Maybe I'm going to be asked to do something about it. And it's just going to be faster and simpler and easier if I don't do it. And so just easier to keep my mouth shut. But the final barrier that I discovered that I think is the most interesting one is people don't share because they don't believe that their perspective is valued. They don't think we want to hear what they have to say. or that they don't think they have the right to say what we have to say, or that for any number of reasons their view is not the view that's important to be put out into the room at that point in time. And so if you're feeling that, and then you have any other level of fear or tiredness or whatever else, it's game over. You're not going to say it. But I think that last one is the most interesting because I think it's the most actionable. If you're not sharing with me because you don't believe I want to know what you have to say, I can change that. I can let you know how much I value you.
Jeff, I work with top talent around the world, across every industry you can imagine, and every single time some senior executive will be in the classroom where I am, and they'll be saying, yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Come by in my office, but here's how you do that. Call this person or set up this appointment or give me, whatever. And they'll even give tactics for how they do it. Afterwards, no, they don't want to hear from me. No, I don't want to waste their time, quote unquote. I'm not important. They have so much going on. I don't want to burden them with my thing. And it's a piece of fear. But it's also a piece of, I don't think I'm important enough. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is the top talent in the organization that has been identified as top talent, told they're top talent. The leader has come in and said, I want to hear from you, drop by. And they're saying, no, I don't think it matters. If that's true for them, imagine what's going on everywhere else.
So true. I love that point.
All right. So ask. Curiosity, safety, make it safe. Then I got to have good questions, and then I have to listen to learn, and then I have to reflect and reconnect. Okay, so can we spend a tiny bit more time on these really good questions?
Yes.
So you said one was a request reactions. Now I have to tell you, this is what I use all the time, but I don't think I ask a good question. I'm always saying, tell me what you think. And people are staring at me like, huh? Which, what of the 100 things I'm thinking do you actually really want to know? So how do we get that question refined? And then what are some other categories?
Okay. So tell me what you think, I think is a better question than many questions that people try to use. So I want to say, first of all, what I like about that question is it's open-ended. It's not saying, does that make sense to you? Which is sometimes what people will say. If you say, tell me what you think, it's much better. That it obviously conveys that you want to know what they have to say. I think if you wanted to upgrade it a little bit or tweak it a little bit, you might say, tell me what you think about this, or tell me what downsides you see about this idea I just put forward, or tell me what I might be overlooking, or what new ideas does that give you? So there's some ways that you could fine tune the question that might help people connect to it a little bit more, or help you get more towards what about their thinking you're looking for.
Right. I think part of what I'm trying to do with that question regularly is get people to reflect. And reflection is not a normal muscle. So I think I got to dig a little bit. Okay, we've just done da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I want your reflections on where we are. What are you thinking about that conversation? So, okay, fair enough. All right. So other qualities of questions besides just reflection request.
So there's a kind of a trio of questions that I think are very helpful when talking about a substantive issue, which a lot of, obviously senior teams are discussing. And the three strategies are: 1, hear their headline; 2, dig deeper; and 3, see what they see. And I'll just say a bit about each one. Hear their headline is essentially trying to understand what is their top line point of view about something. And it's fascinating to me how often people don't say their headline. They might say their, this issue that they have, or that, but to hear their headline could sound like, it could be, so what do you think about this decision? Or where do you come down on this issue? Or what do you think is the right path forward here? But a lot of times people don't tell us their headline. So hearing their headline is one strategy. Those are a few ways to implement it. Dig deeper is a recognition that people's headline point of view is usually grounded in a set of reasons, or thought processes, or concerns, or interests, or values, or whatever it may be. But dig deeper is to say, don't stop by taking their headline and say, all right, this is their position. I agree or disagree with them. I also think it's really interesting to see how quickly oftentimes people will just react to someone's headline without understanding where that headline is coming from. So dig deeper is just simply, can you walk me through your thought process? What led you to get to that thinking? What concerns are you trying to solve for with that? Any number of those things are examples of digging deeper. But often the digging deeper stops there. And I think the most important thing is actually to, what I call in the strategy, see what they see, which is what experiences have they had? What information do they have access to that you don't have access to that informed their thought process that ultimately informed their headline. And so see what they see could sound something like, can you give me an example of that concern playing out? Or what's the information that's based on? Or what's the data that you're drawing from? And sometimes people experiences don't lend themselves to being expressed as data or conventional forms of data. And so another way to ask someone to see what they see is to say, can you tell me a story of how that has played out? And oftentimes people who cannot necessarily put it in terms of, data points and bullet points or whatever, are really good at telling a very vivid story. And I think that's also information. So those are three examples of that kind of, when you're talking about a substantive issue with someone.
All right. For the record, if we were trying to work out not just a decision or a presentation or a direction or whatever, but we had an interpersonal dynamic that was not working, those are the same three questions.
Yes, exactly.
You would come to me with your headline about why this person is, sabotaging work or whatever. Then we'd have to dig deeper and say, what are your reasons behind why you think that? Where is that coming from? And then if I can get you to see what the other person sees or might see, now we have a breakthrough. Same process, just in about every single situation.
Absolutely. Whether it's a discussion about a person and a relationship, a process, a decision, a strategy, it's all
conflict between teams. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So those are questions for substantive. One more category, and then I'll stop.
Yeah. I mean, I think another one that I think is very underutilized is one that I call disclose your dilemma. And so a lot of people are behaving in certain ways or proposing certain strategic directions because they feel like they're in a bind. And if I go this way, it's going to be, I'm going to run into this thing. If I go this way, I'm going to crash into these rocks. So here's what I think we should do. But that calculation of the bind, of how do I navigate that bind and the experience of dilemma is often kept private. The only thing that comes out is, here's what we should do. And so this strategy is basically to say to people, here's what I'm wrestling with. Here's the dilemma that I find myself in. And then the question is, how would you think about that dilemma? Can you see other ways that I could be navigating that dilemma? Is there there's even something about the way I'm framing that dilemma in my mind that might be limiting me? But we don't even get to ask that question if we don't disclose our dilemma first.
I can see how that is powerful as a leader when they're trying to make a decision between two alternatives, neither of which looks great. And to just that the psychological safety, the vulnerability that is created by saying, here's the dilemma I'm facing. A has this consequence, B has that consequence.
Yeah. So that's why I think we should do this. But how would you think about that? Yeah. But what's also interesting is I think it's also a very powerful but underutilized strategy if you're not the leader, but you're a follower or a direct report, especially if a leader asks you to do something that puts you in a bind. And so a lot of people, when a leader asks them to do something and they feel like they're in a bind, will either just do it and, they were right, it's not the right thing to do, or they'll push back on the leader. And then the leader can experience them as oppositional or as conflictual. But if they said, I see what you're saying, I see the value in it, here's the dilemma that I would face if I did that, can you help me think of how would you think through that dilemma? All of a sudden, they're not an opposer to the leader. They're actually a team member, and they're inviting that leader's help. And quite often, that leader will help them have a way to see how they would navigate that dilemma. But they never would get that if they didn't disclose their dilemma.
I agree with that one. And I think about that in terms of time all the time. Yes, I can get this report to you, but you probably don't realize that it takes 24 hours to produce the thing that you ask me for, because it's not that straightforward. And if I do that, then I have these consequences over here. And people never disclose those dilemmas. So the leader never has the chance to say, oh, geez, it's not worth 24 hours. Can you give me an approximation in an hour? Okay, that's a completely different story than let me give you the perfect answer with a completely data justified, et cetera.
Yeah. And by the way, sometimes if they do something, they'll say, okay, fine, but this is going to get delayed. But that's not asking for input on your dilemma. That's just sort of saying, well, here's the trade-off, take it or leave it. Versus to say, I think this is what I would have to do. How would you see this?
Yeah. And what I hear from senior leaders is it's not so much that I expect you to have the answer all the time. I expect you to have thought about it.
Yes, exactly.
And this says, I see two options and I have a dilemma with both options. Help me think through the best course of action. What a fabulous conversation. That's not a weak one. That's actually a very strong one.
Totally. That puts you on the same team. You're working together on it. Yeah.
Yes. I love it. All right, Jeff, what did I not ask you that you think is kind of like a tip in this book that people just need to know?
Well, I would say we've been talking about this at the interpersonal level largely. When people are having a conversation, there's a whole application of the ask approach at the team and organizational level as well. And so people will often say, well, this is great one-on-one, but if I'm a leader and I want to create a situation where everybody in my organization is asking each other questions, kind of like that CEO that you mentioned earlier, where people are asking our customers questions, where people are asking our suppliers questions, where people are learning all around, what can I do about that? And so there's a chapter in the book that basically says, build this as an organizations that ask. And it starts with leaders role modeling it, but it doesn't end there. There's also whole sets of rituals and practices that you can be putting in that essentially structure in opportunities and normalize these kinds of questions for people. There's ways to develop rewards for curiosity and rewards for learning. And so I would say, if this seems valuable to you at the interpersonal level, think about what can also be possible at the organizational level.
I love that one. That is such a teaser. I want to go there, but next podcast, we'll come back to, I love it. Jeff, fabulous conversation. Love the book. Jeff Wetzler. The book is called Ask. Tap into the hidden wisdom of people around you for unexpected breakthroughs in leadership and life. And a headline for me, if you're trying to get out of your comfort zone and lead when you don't know everything your team knows, this is your secret sauce. So Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation, Wanda.
Thank you. And join us next week for another episode in Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone.